नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों। आज हमारे साथ विशिष्ट अतिथि जुड़े हैं श्रीमान दुर्जोटी भट्टाचार्य जी। एक सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट तो है ही, मगर नॉर्दर्न इंडिया जो है, नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न इंडिया, उसके बारे में काफी अहम जानकारी रखते हैं। गुजरात में आपको इनके साथ बिठा सके ऐसा कोई एक्सपर्ट ढूंढना है तो बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा, और इसीलिए हमने पहला एक एपिसोड इनके साथ किया था मणिपुर के बारे में। तब मणिपुर काफी लाइक अ टावरिंग इन्फर्नो चल रहा है। अभी कहीं कहीं कुछ शांति हुई है ऐसा लगता है। क्या है हकीकत? मुद्दा था मैथी को शेड्यूल ट्राइब बनाना। वैसे 90% जो विस्तार है हिली एरिया, उसमें नागा और कुकी रहते हैं, जिनकी पॉपुलेशन के प्रतिशत तो काफी कम है, मगर 90% एरिया इनके पास है। और 10% जो राज्य का हिस्सा है, उसमें ये जो मेतई है, जिनकी आबादी करीब 34% है, वो रहते हैं। प्रश्न ये था कि मेतई कहा करते थे कि हमें पहले शेड्यूल ट्राइब का दर्जा प्राप्त था, मणिपुर राज्य में हम जुड़े उसके बाद ये दर्जा हमें मिलना चाहिए, और इसी बारे में वो हाईकोर्ट चले गए थे। हाईकोर्ट ने भी एक तरह से राज्य सरकार को डायरेक्टिव दिया था कि इनको शेड्यूल ट्राइब में समावेश किया जाए और इस तरह से नया जीआर निकाला जाए। तब से जो हिंसा शुरू हुई है वो थमने का नाम नहीं लेती, और कब थमेगी आज भी कोई कह नहीं सकता। अभी थोड़ी उसमें ब्रेक आई है, मगर कब तक वो टिकेगी, क्या होगा क्या नहीं, अब की परिस्थिति क्या है, क्या मेथी को शेड्यूल ट्राइब का दर्जा मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा, कब से मिलेगा। और कई दफा इस तरह के जो आंदोलन चलते हैं, उसमें हम देखते कुछ और है, सतह पे कुछ और दिखता है, और अंदरूनी बातें कुछ और होती है। तो आज ये सब चीजें हमें भट्टाचार्य साहब से जाननी है कि वास्तविकता क्या है, और इसीलिए हमने इन्हें हमारे दर्शक मित्रों के लिए आमंत्रित किया था। हमारे आमंत्रण का स्वीकार करने के लिए भट्टाचार्य साहब, हम आपके शुक्रगुजार हैं। आपने समय निकाला और हमारे और साथ जुड़े, और हम मानते हैं कि अगला जो अभी डिस्कशन होने वाला है, काफी ऐसी चीजें सतह पे लाएगा, वो जन सामान्य के ज्ञान में वृद्धि करेगा। तो मेरी व्यक्तिगत हैसियत से और हमारे दर्शक मित्रों की ओर से मैं आपका स्वागत करता हूं, और आपने इस मुद्दे पे दूसरी बार हमें अवगत कराना चाहा, लेटेस्ट हकीकत क्या है वगैरह, इसलिए हम आपके शुक्रगुजार भी हैं। चर्चा की शुरुआत की जाए तो ये मुद्दा, जैसे मैंने सतह पे दिखता है, मैं पहले ही कहा कि सतह पे दिखता है और कुछ और होता है, और वास्तविकता कुछ और होती है। तो ये क्या अभी मणिपुर में स्थिति सर्वसामान्य हो चली है? काफी सारी हिंसाएं हुई, उस हिंसा के बाद फिर वहाँ शांति बहाल करने के लिए प्रयत्न किए गए, और इसके फलस्वरूप कुछ शांति बहाल की भी गई है ऐसा लगता है। तो क्या मानना है आपका?
देखिए, जहां तक मणिपुर की बात आज की बात है, तो कुछ चीजें पहले हमें कुछ नंबर्स के तरफ देख लेते हैं। पहले पिछले 8 महीने में तकरीबन 175 लोग मारे गए, कुछ 45,000 लोग डिस्प्लेस हुए, कुछ 4,786 घरों में आग लगाई गई, 386 धार्मिक स्थलों को तोड़ा गया, 4,000 सोफिस्टिकेटेड आर्म्स वेपन्स लूटे गए, उसके साथ कुछ 5 लाख राउंड ऑफ एमुनिशंस लूटे गए, बैंक्स लूटे गए। हाल ही में कुछ 13 सो कॉल्ड कुकी मिलिटेंट्स मणिपुर बॉर्डर, म्यांमार बॉर्डर में मारे गए। एंड सुप्रीम कोर्ट के निर्देश के बाद अभी 2 दिन पहले ही यहाँ पे ये हुआ है, मास बरियल हुआ है। जो लोग मारे गए थे उनका बॉडीज को फैमिलीज के पास हैंड ओवर किया गया है। इन वन सेंटेंस इफ आई हैव टू से, मणिपुर सुलग रहा है। ये भभकता हुआ आग नहीं है, लेकिन ये सुलग रहा है। इट्स सिमरिंग, एंड इफ ground reports are anything to go by, then it will continue to simmer with sporadic fires once or twice every now and then. तो ये चलता रहेगा।
यानी
अभी
जो परिस्थिति है, वहाँ जो जमीनी परिस्थिति है, उसमें आप मानते हैं कि कोई ज्यादा सुधार नहीं हुआ है, और ये
जी,
सुधार काफी लंबे अरसे तक नहीं होगा।
जी नहीं, वो सुधार होने की कोई संभावना अभी तो मुझे अभी तक नहीं दिख रहा है, क्योंकि जहां तक ये कम्युनिटीज के सवाल है, इनके पोजीशंस ओवर द ईयर हार्डेंड होते गए, एंड Indian administration has done precious little to dissolve the situation that was already building up. मई के हिंसा के बाद स्थितियां और गंभीर हुई, positions और harden हुए, and as of now we have not seen the healing touch of the state towards either the aggrieved or the aggressors. हम कहीं पे कोई ऐसा कुछ नहीं हमने देखा जिससे हम ये माने कि as a country, as a system, we are concerned about it. हमारे प्रधानमंत्री ने कुछ 30 सेकंड का एक बाइट दिया था अगस्त में पार्लियामेंट में about Manipur, and that's about it. Now, जमीन में क्या हुआ? जमीन में अब तक, हाँ, जनमानस से ये हट गया है, और भी सारे इश्यूज आ गए, हम बाकी चीजों को लेके बिजी हो गए, लेकिन मणिपुर जहां का वहीं खड़ा रहा और जलता रहेगा। चीजों में, जमीनी स्थिति में कोई बहुत ज्यादा फर्क आया है ऐसा तो लग नहीं रहा है, ऐसा कोई खबर आ नहीं रही है। सो I do not see a reason why we should be hoping for a early resolution or early return of peace until and unless something tangible is done on the field, on the ground. So
What do you
that's
mean
that.
by tangible? Tangible से आपका मतलब क्या है?
देखिए, दोनों पक्षों को टेबल में लाने की कोई कोशिश हुई है? नहीं हुई है। And unless the parties sit across the table and decide to come to a mutually acceptable decision, there cannot be a resolution of any conflict anywhere. And we are not seeing that process taking off. On the other hand, what we are essentially seeing is constant hardening of stance, because the cookies are in no mood to settle for anything less than a separate administration. And the Meitei civil society, the government, and everybody is essentially focusing on protecting the so-called Meitei interest. Now, that is just one side of the.
So-called Metis means what?
So the value and the Meitei interest, as they would want the rest of the world to believe, and Meitei, even the Meitei identity, which is not so homogeneous, is now assuming a monolithic stand. It's getting more monolithic. It's getting more homogeneous, and that is why the consolidation of that identity is also a hard identity against the cookies. So where do I see acceptance? Where do I see the room for maneuverability for peace? I don't see that.
मगर ये जो बात बता रहे थे आप, मैत्री का जो जो डिमांड है कि हमें शेड्यूल ट्राइब के साथ जोड़ दिया जाए, और ऑनरेबल कोर्ट आल्सो रूल एंड डायरेक्टेड द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट की मैत्री को शेड्यूल ट्राइब का दर्जा दिया जाए। अब जमीन के वितरण के बारे में देखें तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा जमीन का ये लोगों के पास वैली एरिया में है, वाइल नगा और बाकी
Is
की
in
जो
China hill
कुकी
areas.
कुकी कम्युनिटी है वो पर्वतों में रहती है। तो आर्थिक असमानताएं भी होगी, क्योंकि वैसे हम देखते हैं
ये
कि जो
बिल्कुल है।
जो रूलिंग है उसमें भी काफी मेजोरिटी तो इनकी है, मैती की।
Metis are the majority, number one. Number two, they while they inhabit about 10% of the landmass, about 10 to 20% of the landmass of the state. The rest is with the cookies, and when they want, I mean, with the sixth schedule in place, they cannot get into the tribal areas. So the tribal, I, I mean, if they are declared tribal, they can access those areas, which would essentially eat away into the already backward cookie community that is fighting the discrimination and sends about 10 MLAs to the assembly. They'll even lose out on that. So fear of losing out is palpable among the cookie community, and that's very, very obvious. Now that is, again, as I said, that's just one of the aspect, because when we are talking about नॉर्थ ईस्ट, हम जब नॉर्थ ईस्ट के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं तो हमें एक चीज ध्यान में रखना ये बहुत जरूरी होता है कि यहाँ पे कई सारे फोर्सेस की इंटरप्लेस चलता रहता है और चल रहा है। इवन आज की तारीख में कई सारे और भी फोर्सेस है जो आग में घी डाल रही है। Now resources is just one part of it, and obviously one of the most vital part of it, but that's just not all.
अगर रिसोर्सेज वो नहीं है, जमीन का कोई मसला नहीं है, तो
जमीन का
मुद्दे
मसला
क्या है फिर?
नहीं, जमीन का मसला जरूर है।
जी।
प्रॉब्लम कि सिर्फ जमीन का मसला नहीं है, मसले और भी है। और मसले प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पे आके खड़ी हो जाती है जब सिस्टम refuses to acknowledge it or address it the way it should. देखिए, मणिपुर की जो लोकेशन है या मिजोरम की जो लोकेशन है, these are very, very sensitive international locations for India. Now, we have a restive state in Manipur where there is a conflict is going on. North of it, we have Nagaland, where we have a peace accord. We do not know the terms of it. And then we have underneath, in the south of it, we have Mizoram, where the refugees from Myanmar are now flooding in. More than 50,000 refugees have come in. Now, that's one side. Second is that these tribal states are yet to consolidate its nationality. That's still in a very, very fluid state of a state. So अभी भी जो माइग्रेशन हो रहा था, ये माइग्रेशन अभी भी चालू, it's still continuing and they are still settling in. So across that region, I mean, आप असम के बराक वैली ले लीजिए, नॉर्दर्न त्रिपुरा ले लीजिए, मिजोरम ले लीजिए, या फिर मणिपुर ले लीजिए, there is the demography is changing. That is one side of it. So there is every time there is a demographic change, there is underlying tension. There is a fight over resources.
आप ये बता रहे थे कि करीब 50,000
शरणार्थी
माइग्रेंट
जो
आए
है,
हैं
जो
म्यांमार से। तो
म्यांमार
ये
से आए।
माइग्रेंट्स भी ट्राइबल्स है या बुद्धिस्ट है?
See, these are Myanmari nationals. I mean, from the Chin community, from other Kuki communities, जो म्यांमार में रहती है, ये एक हो गया. This is one side of the story. Now, India does not recognize them because we are not a signatory to the refugee convention. Indian government had asked Mizoram government not to entertain them, which the Mizoram government defied and allowed them. Now, this is something that has happened. Secondly, हमें ये भी याद रखना होगा कि Myanmar is not a peaceful country right now. It
No,
is
it is ravaged by the civil war.
yes, now it is ravaged by the civil war, as you rightly said. So कई सारी चीजें हैं जो म्यांमार में हो रही है. Now the junta is taking a serious beating from the resistance groups. That would include your Arakan army, that would include your Chin National Army, that would include the Kuki groups. Everybody have gotten together. And what are we doing? If you look at the Myanmar politics, interestingly, the China is also tacitly supporting the resistance groups. But we seem to be completely oblivious of that, and we are kind of backing the junta more than the pro-democracy forces. Recently, I mean, Irrawaddy Times have come up with a very interesting report that says that about 75 junta soldiers who had fled to Mizoram, they were flown to Manipur. हेलीकॉप्टर से इनको मणिपुर ले जाया गया और फिर मोरे तामू बॉर्डर में क्रॉसिंग में इनको रिपैट्रिएट किया गया, क्योंकि जुंटा ने इंडियन गवर्नमेंट एम्बेसी में रिक्वेस्ट किया था. नाउ while this is happening, on the other side, Tamu across मोरे
सर
बॉर्डर
इन बिटवीन मुझे एक चीज जाननी थी. ऐसा
जी
रिपोर्ट्स में कहा गया है कि कुकीज और नगास के पास काफी शस्त्र आ गए और
बिल्कुल
वो शायद म्यांमार रूट से आए हैं. तो एक
बिल्कुल
तरह से it has set a perfect sort of backdrop for armed conflict.
a very heavy armed conflict, and there is no doubt about it, because this has not happened overnight. This has been happening for a very long time, because if you look at that area, this is a part of the Golden Triangle, right? So we had very heavy opium cultivation, we had grade 4 heroin production, and the cookies had one point in time, even now, I mean, they have been the carriers of heroin. So they also had access to sophisticated weapons. And now you have this police armor is looted and 4,000 sophisticated guns out. So what are we looking at? We are definitely looking at a very serious armed conflict if it explodes. And there is no reason to believe that it wouldn't really happen. So yes, this is what is happening. Second, the area adjacent to Indian border is simmering and junta is taking beating. Kuki groups in Chin have asked the Meiteis to vacate, because because a lot of Meitei terrorist groups are camping in Myanmar. And recently, a Kuki school teacher was shot dead by a Meitei person in Myanmar. And following which, the Kukis have asked them to vacate. And they, in Myanmar, of course, they are not referring to this conflict, but they are like, we are uncomfortable with this kind of heavily armed terrorist presence in our own land, where we cannot live in our own ways. So that's happening.
मगर
So other,
एक एक बात ये भी है कि जूस जो निकले दुनिया में अलग अलग जगह पे जाने के लिए, उसमें से एक तबका मणिपुर भी पहुंचा। मणिपुर में भी एक रूलिंग काइंड ऑफ ए व्यवस्था थी, एक हायरार्की थी। ये इसके बारे में अगर आप बता सकते हैं।
This is not Manipur. This is a section of the Kukis who claimed to be the lost tribe of the Jews, and some of them have actually landed up in Israel. But this is something that they have claimed. They have claimed. Now, obviously, if you look at that region, that came under serious uh, influence of the missionaries in the colonial period, and it also forms that chunk that the Britishers wanted as the crown's colony before leaving India. However, the plan had fallen through. So the influence of Christianity and Bible is very high there. So, and then these claims came up. But however, anthropologically, something to suggest this, I do not really have much of the anthropological evidences to bolster this claim. But yes, this claim they have been making for a very long time, and some of them have ended up in Israel. But that is where I would let the matters rest at for this moment. But
So you
having
feel
said
that
this,
this
having said this, I'll just take one.
this the purpose for which Maithis they were fighting to get the the scheduled tribe status, and then on discussion you said no, there are other benefits or other reasons also which they were now gunning for. So what were those other benefits except land?
Land is the primary issue, yes. Land is
Yes.
definitely the primary issue. But with land comes a lot of other interests, because there's a lot of money involved in the in the whole thing, because the con- contour of that region is heavily suited for poppy cultivation. Now, Meitei insurgent groups are involved in cultivating poppy in Myanmar. This is what they were starting in the hills of Manipur as well. Now, if the transporters become the entrepreneurs, their income skyrocket. So, until and unless the transporters get a foothold in the production process, which is by default would mean
Which are these transporters? Are they from within or from outside?
the see, it's the people from both the communities, largely the cookies, who were carrying out the transportation of heroin. Now, if the whereas the it would come down to the valley, where you have the bigger sharks who would produce this, I mean, distribute it, right? So distribution network is a different thing. But so far,
But it
we
is
saw
dominated by whom? If you say that the
the transportation
Myanmar
is.
is a ready market, so distribution network is dominated by whom?
See, you have players from all the parts of the, but definitely it's largely the Meiteis who control the market in the valley. But then when it comes to the production system, and if they're, I mean, they're doing it in Myanmar and adjoining hills of Manipur. If they want to exploit, then they'll need access to the land, and that is something that the sixth schedule forbids them to do. That is exactly why they need the tribal status, apart from other political reasons, of course.
What is the influence of China in this area? Is there any interference
Well,
or
as of now, I do not see much of Chinese influence here. As of now, no. Apart from the fact that some of the terrorist groups were trained by China in very early period, in the early mid 60s and late 70s, when some of the groups were trained by China and they were
so they
heavily,
are they
heavily.
are they are trained by China?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they were heavily influenced by the Maoist philosophy and all that. They traveled to China and all that. That had happened. But in the present context, I do not see China playing a role because China is as worried about Myanmar as we are. Because if China is looking at expanding its CPEC, I mean, and I mean, sorry, what CPEC? I'm sorry. The border, the Belt and Road Initiative, and India is also looking at Myanmar as a gateway to the Southeast Asia. So a restive Myanmar does not work in anybody's favor. Everybody is watching it. Whereas India seemed to be more inclined to back the junta, which is not right now working in its favor.
तो इसका मतलब तो ये हुआ कि म्यांमार जो है उसको एक सॉर्ट ऑफ वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट है, क्योंकि कॉफी का जो प्रोडक्शन वहां से निकल के वहां जाता है, फिर वहां से गेट्स डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड. चाइना अभी एक्सेप्ट सम पेरिफेरल ट्रेनिंग दैट इट ऑफर्स, ज्यादा उतना उसका इंटरफियरेंस नहीं है. तो फिर ये झगड़ा है किस चीज का, और व्हाट कुड बी द सॉल्यूशन?
The solution, when we are looking at Northeast, I think we'll have to look at the states, one individually and two in a composite way, and our general approach towards Northeast.
Do you
Now,
think
when
it is lack of an interaction with the
it
stakeholders?
is definitely a lack of an interaction and a prolonged isolationist policy that has been perpetuated by this government that seem to be otherwise opening up the rest of the country to the
Hmm.
economic forces. Now, Manipur got its ILP in, inner line permit somewhere in 2000, I mean, 2016, right? Now, the inner line permit is essentially a British conception of 1897 73. The that was basically to keep the headhunters at bay. So that should have gone long back, but it didn't. It didn't. Post independence, we sort of adopted this as a protectionist measures for the tribals of certain states, Manipur not included. Now, when the Meiteis started demanding ILP, the Kukis and the Nagas who already enjoy ILP in Nagaland, were totally against it because they realized that if this happens, that would severely cripple their interests more. But then somehow the union government granted it the ILP. Similarly, with sixth schedule, what sixth schedule had done is definitely it gave the tribals a huge amount of say over their resources, but it ruthlessly excluded an average Indian to be a part of a system that he would reside in within India. virtually become a second class citizen.
But that means they have no bondage with the mainland India.
Sorry, you'll have to
They
come again.
don't have any bondage with the mainland India.
I'm not very sure if I'm getting a question, but
I am trying to tell you that that means that these uh, Maithis and Cookies have no bondage with the mainland India.
if you look at the utterance of the terror groups, they have been trying to secede from the country for a very long time. Also, please remember that Manipur is the last princely state to join India. It joined India in 1949, and the UNLF that has recently Indian government signed a peace treaty with. Uh, it's it has been trying to secede from 1968. So yes, they do not identify with India much, and then these protectionist measures only keep them isolated further and prevent them to get mainstreamized. And I'm sorry when I'm saying this about
But
I'm using
then, but
terms like
but then,
mainstreamization.
then most of them are Maithis are in government services. Their presence in the assembly also is quite large. Uh, so don't you think that the administration is dominated by them?
Of course, I mean, the local administration is obviously, I mean, it is that way. It is the locals who are doing it, but the common sentiment that has been tried, people have been, these separatist groups have been trying to foment is a different story altogether. So the local politics, it runs on a very very different tangent altogether. I mean, something that we have seen in Kashmir, that something that we have seen in other parts, is it's almost a similar story. And these petty interests that pile up to explode in the way it has. But the problem is that we need a systemic approach to really break the walls first and bring things together. We have not done this. Now actually used a politically incorrect word when I said mainstreamize, but it was essential for the system, quote unquote, to reach out and to make the presence of India felt there. That has not happened.
But according to you, what should have been an ideal approach if you were to solve the problem?
I said this in this very show earlier also, and I repeat, the place needs to be open to develop, open to market. It needs to be open to development, and development in a way where the money reaches the people. Problem with that region is that the money does not reach the people. It reaches select hands and ends there. It's not that the Indian government doesn't spend it; it has been spending a humongous amount of money over Northeast, but the money does not reach people. If you travel there, you'd see that. You'd see the roads, you'd see the living condition, and then you realize that it's not reaching because the people do not have a stake in the system. And until and unless they have a stake in the system, they'll never be one of ours.
But
That's one
then
thing.
let's
Secondly,
let's let's look at it that some effort has to be made to these warring groups on the discussion table. Why that is not happening?
well, I think that question needs to be directed towards Delhi.
Not why. What is the reason why?
One thing that I'm very, very certain about is that we have not understood well enough and we are not doing enough to understand it. because it is a far more complex region than we think it to be. This is
This is
far more complex than
this is
any
the
other.
progress which has come right to our doorsteps. The, the thunder noise which you must be listening to on this set is the progress that has reached to our doorsteps.
Well, unfortunately, yes. I mean, you'd be surprised to know a lot of cookies, Zumi, brew girls are now flooding Ahmedabad.
Uh-huh.
Yep. You find a lot of them walking across Ahmedabad. And not only Ahmedabad, across the country. I mean,
But what is the reason for that?
because there is no job, there is no money. That is where the problem lies. If they do not have, as I said, if they do not have a stake in the system, why would they care for stability? And we have not done anything towards that direction.
Comparatively, what is the economic status or economic conditions of Maithis?
They're much better. They're better, way better off than the cookies. That is why, but well, being better off is not enough, right? Is it?
So is it the uh, sort of skewed economic development that is one of the reasons which is causing this kind of a conflict?
This is all. As I said, we have this. This is like a blind man feeling an elephant. This is again. This is a part of the problem. This is again also a part of the problem. But the larger problem entails all the things that we are talking about. So it needs a holistic approach. It needs a holistic understanding of the geography, and that is where I think we are failing. We are faltering there.
What is the sort of equation between cookies and nagas?
They had fought their share of bloody wars.
So they are not also comfortable with each other.
When we are talking about the cookies, the Nagas, the Manipuris, or Mizos, the interesting part of it is none of these words, none of these terms are homogeneous. The Nagas have their myriad groups, subgroups, who have been fighting with amongst themselves. Similarly, the cookies have their about 10, 12, or 15 groups. So are the Mizos. So, and each of them have their own share of bloody wars. And these are not feuds, these are wars that we are talking about. So, the Nagas and the cookies had very bitter fights because initially the cookies
So,
were brought
so
into
I
that
think
part of
by
Manipur.
no chance there is anything that is a possible reconciliator or where things could gel and then the rest can be influenced by that.
See, with both the parties hardening their stance, I do not see what would exactly. I am yet to. I don't understand. As exactly what would trigger a peace until and unless there is a genuine quest for peace from both the sides. Now, are we seeing this? I'm not seeing this on the ground because there is anger, there is fear, and there is greed, and that's a beautiful recipe for a bloody war, but where do you see peace in it? I don't.
But
And
then
then it needs
the
active external work, conscious work, and gentle nudge to both the parties to a negotiation table. And that is not happening. And there are too many vested interests that would love to see keep the pot boiling.
The report before me says that भारतीय सेना और असम राइफल्स ने राज्य पुलिस और सीएपीएफ के साथ मिलकर मणिपुर हिंसा को काफी हद तक कंट्रोल कर लिया है। हालांकि राज्य में अभी भी हिंसा की छिटपुट घटनाओं की संभावना है। हाउ फार यू एग्री
I
एंड
completely agree.
कमेंट?
I completely agree. The men in uniform, particularly the central forces, have done human service in saving people, and they have also faced enormous harassment from the Meitei population for saving the cookies. We had visuals flooding us. We had videos coming over how the Marapibis harassed the Assam Rifles Jawans. The Manipuri, I think for the first time in Indian history that the cops and the local police and paramilitary forces were at loggerheads with each other. We have seen all that in Manipur. Because the administration, Manipur administration, I do not have. I mean, it gets a little risky these days to say this, but uh, I think Manipur government has actually backed the Meiteis for all the bloodshed that has happened.
Now, having said all these things, how far and to what extent you feel that this is opening up India for external dangers apart from the internal scuffles that are going on?
See, there is something very interesting happening in Southeast Asia in our neighborhood, and I don't, uh, I mean, at least whatever we are getting to hear or read, which is very, very little, does not inspire much faith in the future. Because the entire region, starting from Myanmar to Vietnam to Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, these countries are restive. And they are being restive. They're being kept restive to ensure that China doesn't reach Bay of Bengal. Now, where would that leave India? India, or at least India's northeast, is gradually becoming a sanctuary for the violent forces that are operating in these countries. So, unless we are very, very careful, unless we are very, very sure of what is happening, and unless we have a strategy in place, I am afraid are we looking at a Indian version of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the northeast? Because that's exactly what the global games have done to Pakistan, and it's the same game that is being played in the Southeast Asia.
Uh, with that background, you still feel that there are infiltrators from the Bangladesh side who are coming and settling down there?
So, if that is a question that you are asking, I have a very interesting anecdote to share. A couple of years back, I was in Kolkata, and I happened to visit Shonagachi, which is the biggest red light area of the country. And I was talking to one of the social workers there about the same question, because that's one of the parameters that would that talks about the immigration, Bangladeshi immigration, illegal immigration. So to say, and that lady told me something very interesting, that over last few years, the girls from Bangladesh are coming really. The influx of the girls from Bangladesh has gone down significantly because Bangladesh is doing really, really well economically. So the economic settlers, we do not see the economic settlers. So if anybody is coming in, they are coming in with some motives other than economics, and that is not a good news for the country.
So they have their own baggage.
Oh, they certainly have their own baggage. They certainly have their own baggage.
But then
And
without economic
we
development,
calling the
how can they
Bangladeshi,
prosper?
I'm sorry.
Without economic development, if they have any other baggage, how can they prosper?
Well, the baggage. I'm talking about the migrants that were coming in now, today, because Bangladesh has significantly prospered economically over the last few years. So now, whosoever is coming in, they're coming in with a different agenda, which is certainly not economic. Having said this, when we talk about Bangladeshis as cockroaches and termites and all these colorful terms, when our leaders throw such brilliant terminology, that kind of erodes the trust, faith, or the goodwill that we had with the neighbor earlier, and that in return would cost us.
But how far and to what extent they are influenced by the Christian missionary?
That's again another a very different ball game altogether. That's a different aspect. I'm not. I mean, because whatever is happening in Manipur or Mizoram, that would echo in Europe, where that will find its voice in Europe and United Nations, as we have seen already. Because the churches, I mean, I remember saying this on your platform earlier, that the churches that were burnt in Manipur were not burnt because Christ resided in it. They were burnt because they were cookie properties. But when those issues were raked up in America or in Europe, then the point was very simple: the Christian lives were being lost. When we spoke to the Hindutva leaders, they had the same thing, that the Hindus are suffering.
But
Yes,
I mean, I'll ask you a pointed question. It is said that the RSS is working in those areas for quite some time by now. What is the ripple effect of their being there, and what kind of contribution or role they have been playing?
well, if I mm, quote my journalist friends from that area, then it is a joke. Because unfortunately, the Sangh does not understand Northeast the way it should. It doesn't.
But that, I think, don't you think that from the times immemorial, we have somewhere down the road, we have not been able to understand or read the Northeast correctly.
That is one part of it. Yes, I agree. But as far as Sangh is working, Sangh's working in Northeast, I'll give you a interesting anecdote from Arunachal Pradesh. Now, if you go to Itanagar, you would see beef hotels at every street corner. The signboards very prominently saying beef hotels. Great. Now you have a India government there, and you have Sangh functionaries there working full time for long time. Yes, so they were really riled with this signboards and went to the collectorate Naharlagun and made a representation against it. Now, since it came from the Sangh, and in this regime, the collector immediately issued a notification asking them to take away to hide these signboards.
But
The impact
when
was
there are
fantastic. Let me
when
just
there are when
complete
there
this.
are sorry,
Let me just complete the incident.
yes,
So
please.
that notification went out, and more than 200 tribes in Arunachal Pradesh who are like constantly at each other's throat. All of them came together and they erupted in anger. It's like, who is an outsider to tell us what to eat and what not to, and how to write our signboards? And immediately the notification had to be withdrawn. Now, this wouldn't have happened if the functionaries or the RSS workers had understood the culture or the of that land. The same thing is happening elsewhere.
Are you through?
Yes, I am.
Normally, when you have occupational army, uh, in the name of setting law and order and kind of a semblance of administration, they end up doing things which make them unpopular and as a result vehicle of creating enmity between the mainland India and these places. How you look at the situation which has been
That
created?
has also that has also contributed. There is absolutely no denial of the fact that excesses have happened. Super excesses have happened. We have enough evidences. That is how the Mehra came into the picture in the first place. The Mehra that is such a dreaded women group today, were born because the mothers of Manipur, they were born because of defense excesses. So yes, human rights violations have happened, and they have happened rampantly. So yes, AFSPA is one of the most draconian legislation,
Yes.
and it has been abused continuously and ruthlessly. No question on that. We do stand guilty of abusing human rights at a very very serious level. So yes, people are angry. People are angry.
But like this Article 370, there is another Article 371 which
371
also which is also uh, sort of
enforced.
giving them a very privileged status. So how far it is being tackled with, or is government of India doing anything to deal with it?
Well, that's ironic. I mean, we are celebrating the abrogation of 370. We are not talking about Article 371. We are not talking about sixth schedule. We are not talking about inner line permits. We are not talking about this range of isolationist measures that have been in place since last 75 years. Why? Because it is not making sense. Because if we are talking about uh, Article 370 being gone from Kashmir, why should Article 371 be in place in Northeast? Why should sixth schedule, a provision like sixth schedule be there? Why can't at the least, why can't we take a look at it? Because if you look at the sixth schedule, which is absolutely correctly in legal terms, you know, but at some point in time, I think as a mature democracy, we need to ask the question that how far constitutionally moral it is. Because it fundamentally violates the right of right of we the Indian who would live in a sixth schedule area but will not be able to cast his votes in a district council election that will govern his fate in the same area. How does that work? But then we are not ready to answer these very fundamental questions. We are not doing anything about it. And then we let all the conflicts brush under the carpet. Now, something very, again, UNLF had Indian government had signed a peace treaty, and right after that, what happens? They go back and say they're not surrendering weapons until Manipur retains its sovereignty. What did you do about it?
तो ये तो बहुत मुश्किल बात है फिर I don't think that there is any chance or semblance of negotiating a peace or peaceful solution and that area like a sort of inferno will wake up and go to sleep, wake up and go to sleep.
Well, I'll go back to the Iron Lady. She sort of ensured peace in one place, and that peace continues. That is Mizoram. The might of Indian Army and Air Force actually ensured that the place, the state gets on the right track and continues being there.
But why same formula cannot work elsewhere?
The same for what we had at that point in time was the political will to do something. Do we have it today? Did we have it in the last 40 years? We didn't. We have been
So
pandering to.
by and large, you feel that there is also one of the major factors which is responsible for defining the solution is lack of political will.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the most important, if not the reason for the simmering tensions in that region. Because it takes a lot of understanding, intellectual exercise, and serious guts to implement something which I have not seen in so many years, I'm afraid.
Then I think that looking to what we have discussed so far, this is going to be a problem which is be like a simmering inferno for many years to come, and perhaps it might best suit China for managing the border situation, especially being closer to the chicken snake, because then it provides China the direct access to these areas, to the chicken neck region.
Unless we really work hard and with sincere political integrity to solve it, yes, you are correct. We are looking at a very unstable, very volatile region for a very long time to come, until and unless we seriously decide and act on decisions to resolve this conflict.
Because having seen all these things on the horizon and also at the ground, if you do not act correctly and leave it to the draconian acts like APSA, then you are putting fuel to the fire, isn't it?
Well, we are. Well, we are. We have been doing this for a very long time. We have been doing this for a very long time, and we continue to do so. We continue to do so. It's sad, but that's what seems to be the reality of the day.
तो उसका मतलब तो ये हुआ कि एक्सेप्ट मिजोरम, बाकी की जगह पे हमें भूल जाने का सब.
Well, we are gradually turning even Mizoram a little restive. So yes, there will be trouble, and I don't know. I mean I do not see a way out without serious action on ground that needs to happen. A lot of things need to change, but until then, unless that happens, yes, we are looking at a very unstable situation in the.
But then who is responsible for providing them food and other some basic amenities for the life, education, food, health?
So the governments are, I mean, the state governments have been doing what it's supposed to, I mean, doing some bit of it. Yes, that is what is happening. And in the displacement, in the refugee camps, civil societies are acting. Some support is pouring in from other places. For the Meiteis, I mean, since that also panders to the Hindutva sentiment, the VHRSS is also doing some bit of work. Yeah.
So again, you have given one more cleavage.
Absolutely, because that has been that is something that has been very categorically exploited at one point in time, but as it lost steam and it moved away from public glare, now we are hearing very little of it. But the moment this fire was lit, the first thing that was came was the conflict between the Hindus and the Christians. That's how it was marketed. It didn't catch up, luckily, but it did enough international damage for the country, nevertheless.
Lot of damage. I think considering that we are surrounded by the naval power as far as China is concerned, right from Chatgaon to Kyokyo to other ports up to Gadar, land boundary from Aksai Chin to Arunachal Pradesh. So this is going to make life difficult for us.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes.
So what is the reason why the policy planners don't see this, and the government is not very alive to the kind of situation that they should have been.
Sir, I guess that is a question best reserved for the people who are supposed to be doing it.
The picture doesn't seem to be very bright or hopeful.
No, it
Is
does
it?
not. It does not inspire much of hope. That I totally agree with you. That I totally
Very
agree.
sad. I think whatever I have understood out of this hour and hours discussion with the kind of insights that you have, the, the, the conclusions one can draw is that there are every player who has contributed less or more in spoiling the situation rather than helping the situation for
That's what
solution.
it looks like. That's what it looks like. That is what it looks like, certainly.
So I think we'll stop here. This is not, that doesn't seem to be, this seems to be kind of an endless uh, jigsaw puzzle which refuses to get this together and emerge with a definite kind of a picture or solution. But but where, how many years it still it will take, or ultimately you feel that it might get out of hands from India's control.
See, what we are seeing in Northeast is also a sociological process, because all these all these communities living in that part of the world, as I said in the beginning, are still formalizing their nationality. Nationality formation is very uneven. So it is in this process where the geographies will be defined, the language and ethnic identities would be solidified, which is yet to happen. So there would be conflict at a very societal level. That is number one. Number two, it would also have frictions over resources, and these frictions, the communities will have to iron them out themselves. And unfortunately, we do not see an external hand easing the way out. Like the cookies or the Zos, they have their notion of Zolam gang, which is the Zoland. The Nagas have their dream of Nagalim. So all these dreams are colliding. So that leads to a very volatile situation, and we are not seeing enough political intervention to stabilize things. So so we have two ways forward. Either the conflicts happen and the so communities, they chart out their own ways through a sanguineous path, or we let the market play its role and probably steamroll them to a track which is a little less bloody. but it is a call that the state has to take as to which way the way forward would be.
But where is the state?
That I guess the state will have to answer.
There doesn't seem to be anybody who can claim 100% that they are they are in control. Or there is not
Nobody.
one of the sensible stakeholders, including Government of India, who seriously wants to make efforts for settlement.
That's exactly what I was saying, because we do not see a honest attempt from any quarter to alleviate the things. We do not see that. We haven't seen it as of today. All that we have seen is how best to exploit the situations for a limited goal, and there where we have left it.
So let's leave the discussion here. Maybe once again at appropriate time down the lane, we might revisit it. Though I am not after these two discussion schedules, I am not very hopeful that something miraculous is going to happen. But
Me
maybe there may be something which could be a disastrous that can happen, and which might as well provide the reason for taking a stock of the situation. We know. So let's wait what happens, how the things are turning around, and how best and how worse it can impact India, and especially Bangladesh, India, and the other
Myanmar,
side.
Myanmar.
Yes, well, it appears it's a no hope land right now. Let's see some solution comes out of it. But then you very rightly said that one of the major ingredients that is missing is the political will. And
Absolutely.
that is so perhaps because it is not politically also so important for the government of the day. So thank you so much for joining us and making this very sort of complex and complicated discussion
Thank you.
understand something which I personally I had many things where I had my own vague ideas which stand clarified today. So I think this is the contribution that you have made to my understanding, and I'm sure
Thank you.
some of our viewers are also equally discerning citizens who might have liked this. So we will keep bothering you, and hopefully someday there will be some solution. So thank you, Bhattacharya, and thank
Thank
you,
you.
viewers, for your continued support and joining us. Let us hope that we meet again on a positive note. So good night and take care.